Earn them all.
Turned out to
Have?
be a miniature
Where's the
long
consultant?
hair Chihuahua.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see
Daisy
him.
May, and she is
Yeah,
small
figure it
and
out.
tiny, probably 3 to 4.
Good morning, everybody. It's 9:02 on Tuesday, November 5th. We are here for a joint meeting with the Planning and Advisory Board to discuss the ULDC draft. Present are Commissioner Luke, myself, Vice Mayor McDowell, Commissioner Emmerich, City Attorney Slayton, City Manager Lear, City Clerk Taylor. I know you as Miss Heather, I'm so sorry, and Recording Secretary Hale. Chair Nicholson, could you please introduce your board?
Thank you. To my immediate left is Philip Lamard. Then to my right is John Metzger, James Sawyer, and Nicholas Crowley, and then myself, Thomas Nicholson.
Fantastic. If we could please stand for the pledge, and Mr. Nicholson, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, Commission, could I please get an approval of the agenda?
So, second.
I have a motion on the floor to approve the agenda as presented by Commissioner Luke, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich. Waiting for the screen. Why don't we just go ahead and do a voice vote?
Mine came up.
Fine.
Yeah, we can do a voice vote, but mine came up.
Oh, there we go. All right, that passes 3-0. Just for the record, Mayor Hanks had a family emergency and is not in attendance, and Commissioner Carasone is not going to be here. So we're going to work through this quickly. We're going to focus on questions only. We will save any comments towards the end, only because we have a lot to go through and a very little time to do it. So if that is all right, we will go ahead and turn this over to the city manager.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. In order to just get this moving, I'm going to turn it over to our staff and consultants so we can get forward.
Nicole Galehouse for the record, Planning Division Manager. We're basically going to go through the draft code. We're going to try to stay focused on high-level policy decisions at this point, not the nitty-gritty of the language.
We can't hear. Can't hear.
This better?
And for the record, Chair, could you please advise the board that your other board member arrived?
The other board member that just arrived is Jerry DeCastro.
Thank you.
Okay, so to start, we're going to try to go through the reorganization of the code and discuss that. And then we'll go through what the consultant has highlighted as the major changes, make sure we're on the right track. And then we've got some time set for each department to speak on any major issues that they have that they would like to see addressed in the rewrite, and make sure we have commission buy-in for those before we start really drafting some of the language on those. So I will turn it over to our consultant.
Good morning, Louis Cerno with Calvin Giordano and Associates. We're pleased to be here to present this first draft of the revised ULDC. We acknowledge that this is a draft. It is the first time that all the language has been put together. There's been a lot of reorganization. We understand there's a long ways to go. This is your first chance to look at it, and it will definitely not be your last. There will be revisions as we go through. There are a lot of outstanding issues that we are working on with staff. But we began this process by looking at high-level issues, and from that we developed a revised outline of the ULDC. and that was presented. And we've also, at your June 5th meeting, identified a number of major issues and recommendations, and we've got some clear direction on that. And from that direction, we put together the actual language of the ULDC. It's a little different than maybe other ordinances that you've seen that are in the standard strike-through underline version. We're virtually removing every section of this code. So if we were going to do strike-through and underline, it would basically be striking the whole document and underlining the whole document. So what we've attempted to do in this draft is to identify in red the section numbers from the original code, from the original ULDC, so you know where the section came from. Generally speaking, underlined text is new text, and stricken text is removed text from the ULDC. There are occasions where text is stricken or underlined, and we put a notation under there where it came from. We anticipate in the future they're going to receive a clean version that'll be a lot more succinct, a lot easier to read. But just so everyone knows where sections came from, this is the format. There's a number of highlights in there, which are a number of outstanding issues that we are attempting to address and will seek direction on, and staff will seek direction on as well. So acknowledging that we do have a long ways to go, but I just wanted to point out where we were. This is the first time putting it together and the first time everybody gets to see the complete document. First of all, I think we point out in our memo the revised format of the ULDC. Again, the final version will have a table of contents at the beginning, a table of contents for the longer chapters, but the layout of the document includes notes in the margins and headers and footers, which tell the reader which section you're on, which we believe this will be a major improvement visually. When we use the hard copy version, it is a much easier to use document, and certainly when we get rid of the strike through and underline, it'll be even that much better. So we think that's a tremendous improvement. We've also, as you know, reorganized the code, and we've included an outline for your use. The electronic version, which I'm looking at on my computer, does have a navigation pane which you can use to negotiate which chapter and which article and section you're in. So that's a great improvement. And again, you'll have benefit when this is complete of the full electronic version and, of course, the new tables of content. I'll just jump right in on page 3 of my memo with the major changes. This should not be much new information, again, because we discussed a lot of these issues in June, but we just wanted to point out where they are located in the current code. We go through and we've removed a lot of redundant language that was repeated in every chapter. That's item number 1, regarding references to the comprehensive plan. We've consolidated language from individual articles regarding appeals. Chapter 7 and interpretation, so a lot of that has been consolidated. And we removed language throughout the document referencing specific fees. We're recommending that this information instead be adopted by resolution. Again, this all adds to make the document more streamlined. Item number 4 is in regard to the definition of multifamily. We've included in this definition detached dwelling units to be on a single parcel under the definition of multifamily. This was the direction that we received, and it makes sense. It allows flexibility. And that's on page 228 if you want to see where it's located in the definitions section of the code. Number 5 is we've revised the definitions of major and minor site plans in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. We're continuing to work with staff on this issue so that the language is being revised. The intent of these changes will be to simplify the review processes for residential construction on existing lots and for minor additions or revisions to existing non-residential developments. So again, the intent is not to reduce the review for larger developments, but really to make things more streamlined for residential construction and for minor additions to existing buildings. These changes appear on page 246 and 247 of your code. We've added, number 6, we've added procedures for lot splits, lot line adjustments, and combination of lots in Chapter 3. This appears on page 328. So again, this is a process that it was in existence. It's not a new process, but we've just added the language to the ULDC. Generally speaking, number 7, we've changed some of the names of uses in the zoning districts, which is in Chapter 4, to use terms consistently throughout the code. We provided a use table. It's in draft form now. There will be a table at the beginning of Chapter 4 that lists all the uses that are included in the ULDC and which zoning district they're located in. And staff has this, and we'd be glad to get it to you at this point. And it's going to be a color-coded table, which corresponds with your land use map, which we think is, or your zoning map, which is going to be a great improvement. And it'll allow people, if they're looking for a specific use, like a coffee shop or multifamily, that they can look, have a high-level view and know which zoning districts they're allowed in. So number 8 is we've added attached residential dwelling units in CGS, ILW, OPI, and CRL. We want to treat these districts as they're currently being treated in the CG district. And we discussed this in June, so those changes are included in the code. Number 9, in the Ag District, at the direction of the Commission, we've added borrow pits as a special exception, and this is on page 423. There's some hesitancy on our part to really recommend this. In the city of Northport, the Ag District allows lots as small as 3 acres. It's not a traditional agricultural as you see in Sarasota County, for example, or other communities where agriculture really means large lots of 10 acres or more. So the Commission may want to consider whether or not to allow borrow pits as a special exception in ag. But again, that was added at the direction of the Commission, and we understood there would probably be some further consideration on that. Number 10, the Conservation District, we added some standards for the location of residential units. This was at the direction of staff, and that language is included on page 429. Buffering standards in the neighborhood, commercial, high, low intensity districts, we basically moved those to the landscape buffering section just for consistency purposes. Number 12, the commercial recreation district, we have provided clarification that a caretaker's house is an accessory use rather than a principal use, and that's really going along with the language that clearly indicates the intent is that this be an accessory use. We're working with staff currently on the whole commercial recreation district. We understand there's very limited use of this district in the city, and we may want to seek to eliminate this, but we're doing some additional research on that. In number 13, in the commercial redevelopment district and the ILW districts, we've added dwelling units as accessory uses. This appears on page 445. Number 14, in the ILW district, we have added tasting rooms as an accessory use, page 491, and this is based on discussions with staff as a potential use that could go into ILW. Number 15, we've added specific standards of compliance with the city's low-impact development standards. These appear on page 524. The current language is pretty discretionary, so we added some specific standards to know and to allow staff to know whether or not someone is complying with these standards. Number 16 and 17, we've added criteria for granting waivers and criteria for granting appeals, just to give the Commission additional information on how to know whether or not to grant these waivers and appeals. These changes appear on page 725 and 729 of the document. Number 18, we've added procedures for approval of the comprehensive plan amendments, section 812, or page 812 rather. Number 19, we've eliminated minimum size requirements for guest houses and guest apartments, page 957, and this is, we had some discussion with the commission on this as well, so we're just adding that language. Number 20, we've revised the maximum size restrictions for home occupations in the Ag District, page 958. And this is really just in recognition of allowing additional flexibility in Ag for potentially doing larger areas and areas outside of the principal structure for home occupations. Number 21, we've added standards for accessory uses to houses of worship. This is based on experiences of staff, and those appear on page 959. Number 22, we've added standards for the location of parking and drive-throughs along multimodal transportation facilities for those areas, and these appear on page 12.6. And then we've done quite a bit of changing to the parking standards, really just allowing clarifications for, we've addressed, added a requirement for electrical vehicle charging stations for large developments. These appear on page 1215. We've added minimum bicycle parking space standards, page 1211. We've added maximum parking standards just to provide the opportunity to reduce unused parking. We've added parking reductions for specific developments, and this is really just to allow applicants for developments to submit for reduced parking standards for specific types of developments, and they can submit specific parking studies to address this. This really, again, trying to reduce the amount of unused parking that is being built. And then generally speaking with sign regulations, we've gone through and removed a lot of the language, existing language regarding sign content. Just so, again, those are a summary of the major issues we've addressed. There are, of course, larger issues I know that the city is concerned with. A lot of them are outside of the scope of the project in that they involve comprehensive plan amendments and will require more input from the city and from the public. So there are going to be larger issues that are not going to be addressed in the ULDC update. We will provide you with a summary of what those are. Again, so there's a lot of things that we have not addressed that I know that are concerns of the city. But again, we're trying to stick to the primary task of really updating the ULDC. And in that vein, we recently received the city's direction on the tree protection regulations. Those changes will be incorporated into the next draft of the ULDC, but at the time of the first draft, we did not have that direction, so we will be inserting that in the next draft. But the tree protection section as it exists now has really just been brought into the same format and generally updated. But that's just really a summary of the major changes to the ULDC. A lot of the other changes you see, I know it's an unwieldy document at this point, are really just the result of moving things around, and we've attempted to notate that as best we can. So that summarizes my presentation. So whenever we get everybody's input, I'd be glad to answer anybody's questions.
Okay, I have a couple housekeeping things to take care of. For the record, Commissioner Carasone arrived at 9:12, and there was no public comment. I didn't call for public comment. There was no cards. And just for the record, there was no public comment. If anybody has a card, please make sure you bring it up so we can make sure we hear it at the end. All right, so at this point, what I would like to do to keep things moving is to see if anybody has general questions at this point. We'll do one question, move on to the next person, and include the PZAB. And then we'll go back around for general questions unless you want to, city manager, do you want to have staff talk first?
Sorry. We're open to however we can get you all what you need on this, so I don't have a
Does
preference.
staff need direction on these 27 items that the consultant had weighed in on?
I don't think we need specific direction on each item, but I would say if there's ones that you disagree with or want to tweak how it's been done, we would need that type of direction.
Fantastic. All right, so we will start with Commissioner Luke for one question, then we'll move down the road and we'll just kind of keep going around until the questions have been answered. Go ahead, Commissioner Luke.
I think I only have 3 questions anyhow.
Okay.
All right, the first one is addressing the borrow pits. I know we had a discussion up here a while back. I think I was on different belief system of that. I would actually like to hear from PZAB what you think on the topic of the borrow pits in agricultural.
Go ahead, Commissioner Chair. I'm
And
sorry,
I know
Chair.
one can't speak for all, but, you know, if one starts and people agree, say, I agree, or if you don't, let me know why you don't.
Mr. Trolley?
Why, I don't know what a borrow pit is.
If I could provide some clarification on that, the existing ULDC has a pretty good definition of borrow pit, and I won't read it verbatim, but it's basically when you are moving dirt off the site for sale, for use on another property. A borrow pit is not, and this may be where some of the confusion came up, a borrow pit is not when you're building a pond for your development or moving dirt around to level the site. It's really when you're using dirt, usually from a site for construction somewhere else. A lot of times it's sold for development. So we believe it's there. That was some of the confusion of the city's initial discussions on borrow pits was what's the difference between selling dirt off a site and moving dirt for the development of the site. So that's generally what the definition of a borrow pit is.
Does this make sense? Are there any questions on it?
How do you feel about it?
I think it's okay.
Jerry?
I agree. I mean, if he wants to sell his dirt, good luck, God bless.
Jim?
As far as moving dirt, I mean, I know there's clean fill and there's dirty fill and there's certain fills that you can use on, say, another residential lot. So as long as clean fill, I don't see a problem with it moving from one location to another location within the city. I mean, that's the only thing I can say on that.
How about the selling of it, like a
Selling of it?
business? Yeah.
Like from one contractor to another contractor, or are you talking about a homeowner selling it? Homeowner? I don't know that I would allow for a homeowner to sell dirt from their, say, an undeveloped lot that he might have. I think there should be some restrictions on that.
John?
I disagree with it because we have commercial people that do this for a living. And I don't really think that we need to be going out in the estates and digging big holes and moving it around the city, so I disagree with it.
Philip?
I'm not clear about what the current, the revised ULDC says about borrow pits. We all probably know about the borrow pit that is in the Sarasota area that became a venue for international rowing competitions. I'm not sure either what the state of Florida requires with respect to rehabilitating an area where dirt had been borrowed. In other words, where refill is required. I'm not sure what that, there is one, but presumably that's an expense that contractors sometimes avoid. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Joe.
My position on it is I would agree with John. I would say no. for all the reasons that he cited. Plus, I believe in the past, there's been, I won't say major, but there's been a lot of discussion about this as far as the impact on the damage done to our roads by, moving this back and forth. And, I really, I don't see a need, that would be my reason for opposing it.
Let's hear from the board. Commissioner Emmerich, what are your thoughts on the borrow pit so we can give them some type of direction?
Well, I believe in the past, we have something right out there by Public Works that they said they were coming in with the water park and they dug everything out, sold the fill, and then they decided to just leave. So now we have 3 big holes out there. I have no issues with personal homeowners using their own dirt on their own property. But to go out and sell it to a consumer, I cannot agree with that. So that's where I stand on that.
Commissioner Carrison.
Question to staff. When we talk about burrow pits, and we're talking about specifically in the ag area, I know that in the past, what's happened is large-scale development has created burrow pits. They, for instance, Lake Geraldine over on River Road, they created a large-scale burrow pit, sold all the dirt and used it for development, and then backfilled it as a lake. Same thing has happened out in the estates, obviously, many times. So the question is, if it is in relation to an actual large-scale development, would this preclude them from being able to sell that coming off of their land? Not that I don't think there's any large parcels that are, lot lines that are dissolved that could become a large-scale development out in the estates, but still.
So right now, the way we handle borrow pits is that's basically the exclusive use, is that it's being dug for sale. If it's out in, Cedar Grove or what the West Village is, and they're digging ponds as part of it, and they're using that fill on site, we don't consider that to be a borrow pit.
Mhm.
When they go to take fill off site, that's
what they're doing, yeah.
That's when it gets a little murky. We do have a provision if it's going from one approved development to another approved development, where we exempt them from basically the borrow pit special exception process. But if they are just selling it off to dirt haulers, and having basically a sale of the dirt off site to different entities, that we would consider a borrow pit.
Okay, and that's how it is currently.
Yes.
And the change would then be,
So I believe the change, right now, the code is ambiguous as far as where it's allowed and where it's not. It's all handled in the earth moving section. And it addresses it as borrow pits are a special exception, just basically wherever, and they're not specifically prohibited anywhere.
okay,
So this, I believe, turns and puts it where they're only permitted by special exception in the estate.
okay. And so in a case like the going from one development to another, it would be allowed by special exception? Or it would be allowed, okay?
I don't believe it's changed, but we have an exemption permit when it's going from one to the other. It doesn't have to come to commission for that, whereas the special exception would.
Okay, because I agree with Mr. Nicholson, is that I don't believe that burrow pits should be out in the ag area. I don't believe that a sanitation business should be out in the ag area. I don't believe any business other than those that have to do with hay and horses and true agricultural businesses should be out there. So I was hoping that one of the things that we accomplish with this ULDC rewrite is to get rid of those businesses that exist out there, at least sunset them.
We are separately looking at the idea of sunsetting. I'm working with legal to address that, and we should be coming back to you soon
Okay.
on that item. I would agree that we need to address what the uses are in the estate.
Yep.
As well, I personally feel that we should change the name of the zoning district because it creates a lot of confusion.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
All right, as far as my thoughts on the borrow pit, after studying a little bit more about it, I have concern about having it open to commercial. It's going to have an effect on the roads that we are going to have to continuously maintain. Those dump trucks and hauling equipment is very detrimental to our roads. Some of the roads out in the estates are even a no-through road for those trucks. I think we're just opening the city for a can of worms that we really don't need to have. If we, staff, when we allow a development to use it on another approved project, so let's say they're digging in one area and they want to move it to another area, is that only in our city? Is there a caveat saying only in the city? Or can they sell it to another project in Charlotte County or in Venice?
They're able to leave the city with it.
Yeah, see,
So-
I have a problem with that.
But only if they're going again to a single
Other
site.
development.
So for example, one of the ones we had is going from, it's the same builder doing both projects, but one of them's in Northport, one of them's in,
Sarasota.
yeah, Sarasota
Yeah.
somewhere. And so they're bringing it to basically, like, they're not really selling it, it's still the same people using the dirt.
Yeah, but it's going off Northport's proper area. If it was staying from one development in Northport to another development in Northport, I could agree with that. But to do it off-site, it's essentially a borrow pit that's not being charged. It's one developer using it for another development that the city is not getting any benefit from. Do you understand what can we make it that it can only stay in the city?
We could amend or include that in the amendments, yes.
Because I agree with the ag that we shouldn't have borrow pits at all. But if we're going to have this transfer of dirt, it should stay in the city limits.
Yeah, so to add one more point of clarification to the development to development, it's excess fill. So they have to dig the lakes to a certain depth. They use as much of it as they can on site, and then they're taking excess. They're not digging the lakes deeper just to take it off site. So that's part of the difference with that and a borrow pit as well.
So I guess we.
May I speak
Yeah,
to-
absolutely.
Okay. I am of the same opinion that I was previously, and I don't want the borrow pits out in the agriculture. I do believe that large development needs to be able to get rid of the excess under the process that we have currently. I think that is good. Agricultural area is pretty much all sold, plotted out. It is what it is. 75 is all done. I mean, that was a lot of the reason those pits were dug, was using the dirt, for 75. So I think the city has grown up enough that we don't really have to look at that. As somebody else stated, there are private businesses who do that stuff. And I don't think we need to turn the business of selling dirt out into that agricultural, or even on any small developments, and keep what we have for the large. Thank you.
City Attorney, do we need to do these things by motion, or can we get consensus?
My apologies, Vice Mayor. You can
That's
do it by consensus.
By consensus, thank you. Last round, anything to add to this, Commissioner Carasone, about borrow pits?
Yeah, in discussion about the moving from property to property and staying in the city, I think that if it's their land, it's their land. And that if they want to move it from one area of their property to wherever their other project is, be it in Northport or not, I think that should be fine, because I can't see creating an undue burden that, say they have another property in the city and they're just going to start dumping that dirt on their property, and then we wind up with another issue where we wind up with all this extra dirt on pieces of land that we really don't want. So I think as long as it's land to land and another development, even if they sell it to another development, I don't have a problem with it. And maybe that's what the criteria is. If you sell it to another development, it needs to be within the city, or you can transfer it to your own land, wherever that may be.
And it has to be excess.
Oh, well, that's mandatory anyways, right?
Did you have
That would be
anything
my
else,
idea.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Yeah, I just wanted one question on clarification. Let's just say we're discussing the agricultural area out there. If they're digging a pond and they're using that dirt on their property, then it's not even considered a borrow pit, correct?
If the dirt doesn't leave the site and they're digging a lake, there are provisions in our code for the standards that have to be met for a lake, yes. So that would not be considered a borrow pit.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, so we'll get consensus to, do you want to allow borrow pits in the agricultural district?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, so no borrow pits in the agricultural district?
Thank you for your input. PSAP.
Do you need direction about the transfer of dirt from one to another? Because I've heard a few different options.
If we want to make any changes, I would say yes. Can I ask one other question with the borrow pits? Do we want to allow them anywhere?
In the city? Right now, are they allowed anywhere else in the city?
Special exception only. But there's no like limiting factors because they're,
Where else in the city?
right now it's strictly by special exception anywhere. They're not prohibited anywhere at this point.
So,
Personally, myself, I don't mind leaving it as a special exception because we do have a master plan coming forward for Activity Center 6. That is an area that we'd like to see some industrial, and we may have to see properties combining and stuff for a larger development, so I don't mind leaving it as a special exception.
Yeah, me neither.
okay, so here's where I'm confused. If we just said no out in the estates, which is an acreage type of a property, and now we're saying that residential, it's by special exception, and it's an 80 by 20 lot. Obviously, it's not going to get approved, but why even go through have them jump through the hoops?
Well, maybe that's where we want to add it as a prohibited use in certain zoning districts. You know, leave it as a special exception for the others. It's not listed at all, but
Commissioner Carrison?
But Commissioner McDowell makes a good point. Isn't that commercial use? I mean, shouldn't it only be allowed by special exception in commercial zoned areas?
it is a
period?
commercial use, so it shouldn't, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
should
it should
not
be
be
covered
in
in-
any RSF area. It should be strictly
That's
by
true.
special exception in a commercial use or commercial.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Would
that.
include the activity center, so
Exactly.
Activity Center 6 could be
All right, can we get a
included in that.
consensus to allow borrow pits in commercial general areas only in the city with a special exception?
Yes.
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 Yes. I think we covered borrow pits. Is there anything else left on that? Ms. Scalehouse?
Oh, no.
Okay.
sorry.
All right, Commissioner Carrison, do you have any general questions you'd like to ask or get clarification on or direction given?
Well, the ag use, I mean, the whole ag discussion and the what's allowed and what's not in sunsetting some of those businesses out there is really what my primary concern is. So I don't really have anything particular. I really would like to hear more from the board and their views and opinions before kind of moving into that. Because, I mean, we heard a presentation, but didn't really get the board's opinions, you know?
But if I heard correctly, your question that you had asked earlier is
Yeah,
already
it's
being
already
addressed.
being addressed, yeah.
Okay,
That's why I
so-
said, because it's already being addressed, that was my primary concern. So until I hear more opinions from the board itself,
Okay,
I'm
so
going to
I'll let
reserve
you
my
go
right.
ahead. If you want
Yeah.
to have the board weigh in on your comment, we'll
well,
go ahead.
I was hoping that they would weigh in on anything that's a priority to them
Right. We're-
individually on this ULDC change.
And like I said at the beginning, and I apologize, we're going to do one question, and the board is also going to have questions. And then we're going to do questions, and then we're going to get through this agenda. And then if there's any time at the end, then we're going to do general comments. All right, so if you have a question, Commissioner Carrasone, if not, we'll move on to Commissioner Arbridge. Commissioner Emmerich?
I just have a general question. We're talking 800 pages in the original ULDC. How far have we shaved it down? Where are we at?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. There's a lot of repetition of code, things that have been struck and things that have been, that appear more than once. So I think it will be significantly smaller because there was a lot of repetitive language regarding comp plan references and appeals in every section, the same language repeated in every chapter. We're going to be removing that. Right now it's stricken, so
Right.
it adds to pages. But yeah, I think that'll significantly reduce the size of this.
Okay, so we're still hopeful that we're gonna be chopping that down and take out all the redundancy and get it crystal clear to where it's easy to follow and easy to maintain.
Absolutely, yes, that's the goal.
That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Chair Nicholson, would you mind if I called on each one of your members of your PZAB for questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Trolley, if you have any general questions to the consultants regarding the ULDC draft that's presented.
At this time, no.
Mr. Nacastro? Mr. Sawyer?
The only comment I have is I'm kind of tying on with what Commissioner Emmerich said is, I was trying to read this document again and going through it. It's like 800 pages, and it's pretty extensive, and sometimes there's some areas that I just didn't really understand. And as a resident, you think, well, what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? And of course, if you're having a home built, you let your contractor do everything for you because you don't know what you need for a tree canopy. You don't know what you need for a canopy or for drainage and all that. So, yeah, I think it can be. Obviously, I know they're working on cleaning it up, so that's my only concern is to make it where it's easily understood by a resident and hopefully shorter.
Okay. Did you have any questions regarding the ULDC draft that's before us that you'd like to get answered?
No, not really. No questions on any specific topic, no.
Mr. Metzger?
I'm just glad it's about time we're finally doing this. I mean, it's been sticking out for a long, long time, and I'd say the more strikes you can get through there, the better.
Mr. Nicholson, did you have any questions?
Probably not a question, just a couple of comments that, over the years, and it's not negative, but it just happens that you have a boat that develops a leak and you patch it, and then it develops another leak and you patch it. I like the fact that what we're going to do now is we're going to, fix all the leaks. I do want to compliment whoever decided to go with the red line version. For those of us, in the public, it's very, it makes it a lot easier to read, to see what's changed, what's replacing what, without having two books and wearing your fingers out. So I want to compliment whoever did that. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Lamont, do you have any questions about the ULDC draft?
Thank you, no, at this time.
Not at this time, okay. My turn. When I was reading through this, I saw that a lot of the authority that the city manager currently has, it says city manager or designee, is shifting now to the director of the department responsible for land development services. And I'd like to understand the thinking with removing the city manager's authority.
Give me 1 second, I'm sorry. We had a conversation about this and I'm trying to jog my memory.
Yeah, and I know we had the discussion, and I think that usually the director is the designee for the city manager. So we went with that language. There's a number of ways you could do that. Leave it as it is for city manager or designee, or put it under the department head. Our thinking is that with the ULDC going forward to prevent the patching of the leaks of the boat going forward, that we have an individual staff person responsible for overseeing future amendments and also overseeing interpretations of the ULDC. So I think that was a discussion. It could go whichever way the commission would like, but that's my recollection, is that I really wanted to have one person designated as the responsible party for the ULDC, other than the city manager, which oversees everything else with the city.
And here's my concern with it, and this is something that we'll have to give them direction on, is the city manager, first off, who is that person? Because it says department responsible for land development services. Currently, who would that person be?
Frank Miles.
Thank you. So because it's a staff person, we as a commission can't give direction to staff. We can't hold them accountable. That's why, in my opinion, everything is to the city manager. The city manager is ultimately making that decision by designating Mr. Miles or whoever to make those decisions, but ultimately it's on his shoulders. By transferring it automatically to that person, it's removing the city manager and our ability to hold him accountable. And that's my thoughts on it. And Commissioner Carasone, go ahead and weigh in.
First of all, this is my second time going through this nightmare, just so you know. The first time, the authority was really within the commission. Most things had to come up before the commission for approval. I believe I was outweighed in keeping it that way when we rewrote it the last time. And all the authority then went to the city manager. Now it's going from the city manager to a director. And it said city manager or designee. Well, of course, the city managers of the past always had their designee be the building department, planning and zoning, whoever it was at the time. And the problem lies within that, that opinion from the director that what does this mean? Because it means something different to our past director than the current director. You see what I mean? So we really, and I get that maybe rewriting it will clarify some of that and will not leave so much up to interpretation, but it's still a big concern that the decision lies within just the shoulders of a director singly. Maybe there needs to be an appeal system put in place where the city manager oversees it or something.
So I found my notes.
You found your notes. Look at you.
So the email.
Hey, you're looking a lot better today than you did yesterday. I gotta say.
Yesterday. So for interpretation and appeals, it would go to the department responsible for land development services. And the reason for that is because there is then an appeal process to that. When the director makes an interpretation, that goes in writing. So, you know, the next director, if they have a different opinion, would have to overturn that interpretation. But it also gives them an appeal process to go through if they disagree with that interpretation.
So let me get this straight. So in the current structure that we have now, it would go to, say, Mr. Miles. Mr. Miles says, no, don't agree with that. Then it goes to who?
I believe it may depend on where, and this is one of the things that we're trying to clean up so the process is the same throughout the code, but different chapters treat appeals differently. Most of your appeals are going to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Who would override that?
It would go to the court system after that.
Yeah, see, that's what changed too, is the court system, because it always came to the commission to make that decision, and then later on they changed that to the court system. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the city manager should have more of a...
There were two other things where, when it says city manager or designee, generally speaking, his designee
It's
is
the director,
usually
right?
the director. There are cases where it just says city manager, and we're recommending leaving that as is. And this was run through the chain and received approval from our internal staff.
I guess my only question would be, city manager, how do you feel? I mean, what is your, I mean, granted, everything, whether it's what director or whoever it is, it all falls on your back regardless. You're the one responsible for that director, so.
I can't say I disagree with you on the fact that, you know, it does take it straight from the director. We do have other areas in our code that I also, you know, don't have the ability to override, and odds are never would, such as like the fire marshal is a good example of, you know, I'm not going to override the fire marshal on fire codes. That being said, the way this reads, as Ms. Galehouse did just say, it goes straight from the director to zoning board of appeals. So if somebody comes in, I guess in taking this to an extreme, which usually points things out, I think, if, for example, Mr. Miles was to make a call based on the way this is written that I didn't agree with, my only alternative is to eliminate Mr. Miles and replace him, which is not exactly.
Don't even think about it.
New director, but I can't override it at all because I'm not in that chain.
But can you really? Because he has the authority to make that decision.
That's what I'm saying, I can't override him.
Right,
The only thing I can
so-
do is say he's not doing a good job and, like I say, replace him.
This is what my, I mean, you make a great
Concern that you all are
point,
addressing.
yeah.
In on this, I actually appreciated going to the Board of Appeals. That is a group of people, and I've sat in their meetings, and they are wonderful. And they, legal, I mean, you're one entity. It could create a fraction between within the city because of the two of you being opposed. When it then goes to appeals board, it is the majority of the board rendering that decision.
And right now, it still would.
Still would.
It would go, after me, it would go to the zoning board of appeals. We're not eliminating that next step.
We're eliminating him.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Of appeals.
No, of everything. So right now, and Ms. Galehouse, you'll have to help me. Right now, we, the commission, give the city manager the authority to waive something in an easement. The city manager has that authority to waive anything in the easement. We can say, city manager, we want you to waive this. We can weigh in on something, like basketball hoops. That was one of the big things many, many years ago.
Yeah.
Where we could say, city manager, get rid of all the basketball hoops in the easements. City manager would then direct his staff to do that job. Right now, we could not say, Mr. Miles, we want you to remove all the basketball hoops in the easement because we cannot direct him. We can only direct the city manager. And that is my biggest concern. We're removing our ability to direct our city manager, who then would direct his staff, because we cannot direct staff.
But I understand why they wanted to write it that way. I mean, it kind of cut it a little bit, but the authoritativeness of everything needs to flow through the city manager. I agree with that.
If I may, I think it may depend on what aspect of this you're looking at. As far as, the example we were using of interpretations and appeals, that's how it's written in our code currently, is that it goes to the director of the department responsible for land development services, and then those questions of that go to zoning board of appeals. So that's not a change unless you direct it to be a change. That's how it's currently written. It would go directly from the director to the zoning board of appeals. I believe that where the changes we were looking at making were the ones that specifically say city manager or designee. And it just may be different depending on which one it is. But I definitely see where you're coming from and what changes you want to make, but just to.
So in essence of time, if we could get a consensus to keep city manager or designee as the preferred language, and if there's something that makes more sense, like with the appeal process, that you bring that back for a separate conversation the next time.
Yes?
Commissioner Luke? Yes, obviously. Commissioner Carrasone?
Obviously, yes.
Okay.
You have a question down front?
I'm sorry. I apologize. I hold up on the consensus.
No,
Let's hear his question.
I don't know the order, but from sitting here listening and, having heard a little bit of this before, putting it into a military standard is like you're trying to change the chain of command. And that most generally doesn't work good. The chain of command is there for a reason.
Currently, the chain of command is us commissioners giving the city
Right.
manager
And-
direction.
and
We
it
want
makes
to
sense.
maintain that.
To the manager to the staff. That's a good chain of command. When you start breaking that chain of command, you're gonna be herding kittens.
And that is exactly why I posed the question, because the draft is changing that chain of command. And I was trying to preserve it with the question. Mr. Tillman.
Mr. Nicholson and
Commissioner McDowell, you raised a very valid point. Now, most bigger cities, like Philadelphia, for instance, and New York, the city mayor, which would be what we have our city manager, would be the one who has the final say. Here we have our commissioner with the final say. You're absolutely correct. If we change the chain of command, you're no longer going to direct the city manager, and that's going to take our elected officials out of the loop as well, and not allow the citizens to have a say. So I think that we can't be changing that. We do have 2 assistant city managers too, so it's not like he's overburdened. He'll be able to handle it, and he can bring it to you. So, I mean, I think that we shouldn't be messing with that.
And we, by consensus, we took the draft changes and put it back to the old way of doing it.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Did anybody else have a question, comment? All right. All right, so I got to ask
Have
my
more
one.
comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand go up. I apologize.
I agree with you, Commissioner McDowell. If we do that, it's opening Pandora's box and it's caused many problems. Chain of command needs to be respected, or it's going to cause problems in the future.
Thank you. All right, so since we've all had our first round of questions, I am going to break protocol and allow public comment at this point. Kevin Rouse, Mr. English, and Mr. Suggs.
Name and address still?
I'm sorry,
Name and address still?
just your name.
Kevin Rouse. Apologize about my voice. I kind of went out during the weekend, but just had a couple notes here. One, I thank Nicole because we're opening a new business here. Name's not important, but she's been a great help with us. But I do have a couple issues she's well aware of too that we just want to discuss while we're here. The first one is I used to be proud to sit on the PZAB, and excuse me, coming down to the zoning issues of our type of a business establishment, the issue is, luckily, I relieved myself from that board because I wouldn't have been able to even give this public comment or sit where they're sitting or give a presentation with my wife because as it's written now, we're going to have to file for a special exception. And, excuse me, for all intent and purposes, legally, by the letter of the law, we're trying to work with the city, give some patience, but I'm speaking with other city managers and legal counsels and things. We don't fit the special exception. So I have meetings scheduled. I've met with Mayor Hanks. I believe I'm going to meet with a few of the rest of you when you're free. I appreciate that. So are we on a 3-minute thing?
We've got a minute and 45.
So first of all, I understand. I'm one to understand this. It's nobody's one fault. I know where we're at because I've reviewed this myself, the PZAB, the zoning. It's very important. The ULDC has been for a couple of years. Systematic breakdown, I think, that happens in all over government. Lack of communications. We're not going to fix that. The problem is that for people like myself and my wife, and I'm just using us as an example, is that if we're placed under a special exception, it's going to cost us extra money. It's going to cost us extra time. And not only that, but each step, when it gets sent from building to zoning, then it holds up our permitting process, which means we'll end up bleeding money also because as part of our lease, we have to pay our lease payment even if it's not our fault, even if it gets held up in the permitting process. So that's just a point I wanted to make. I understand, city and government and working in it a long time and still being parts of it. And I know that the city is there to protect itself and its residents and against lawsuits, PZAB up to zoning appeals. But when you place people in something undue, or you're basically opening yourself up to further lawsuits, in the future, which I don't want any more battles either. And I know there's multiples out there right now, businesses that have a chance to do that too. I don't want to see that as well as anyone else. Basically, it's just preventing one of the most important and exciting cities. This is no fluff, Northport. I think everyone kind of knows from being the city it should become properly. So thank you, and I look forward to meeting with you guys when we can.
Thank you, Mr. Rouse. Mr. English.
Morning.
Good morning.
This is pretty close to what you're discussing. I don't know if you guys have the ability to go to section 22, or section 1423 of the existing code. It would be section A, line 10. Environmental studies performed within 1 year from the date of application. The study must reflect the utilization of the project by state or federal listed species or presence of wetland and other valuable native habitats, and how these resources will be protected or conserved as a result of the proposed earth-moving dredge and fill activities. The last line. These requirements are at the discretion of the Public Works Department. What does that mean to you? What it means to me is that anybody in Public Works can negate those terms. At least that's what it means to me. And that's the kind of information or stuff that I'll be looking for in the rewrite, especially as it relates to shall and will and may and could. And I thank you, really. You guys are,
What chapter was that again?
yeah, what, pardon me?
What chapter again?
That's the dredge and fill, the one you were discussing earlier. That's that's section, chapter 14, section 23, line 10.
No, we haven't made any.
Section 23, line 10? Is that what you said?
Section A, 10.
Mr. English, if you could please state the exact location of that for the record so that we
Okay,
can all hear it.
I will state exactly where it is. It is in the earth-moving dredging and fill regulations.
Under the new ULDC, it's section 3-70, 370. I think it's page 3144.
Would you repeat that one more time, please, sir?
Section 370, page 3144.
Okay, Mr. English, you have about another minute left. Did you have anything else to add to your public
No, I just want to
comment?
bring that to the commission's attention and to make them aware that the word discretion is used quite often and with no direct accountability to who gives that discretion. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
all.
Mr. English, for bringing that to our attention. And next is Mr. Suggs.
Rich Suggs, Northport resident, also chairman of the Chamber Economic Development Committee. We were just having our meeting prior to this meeting, and in that meeting it came up that, as you know, we have a comprehensive plan that is more state mandated and a ULDC. We also are separated by activity centers here in Northport. And so there was a discrepancy that came up, and I would just like clarification that the activity centers and the zoning in that activity center was more geared toward and controlled by the comprehensive plan instead of the ULDC. And so we were just trying to determine, because we spent quite a long time in our committee trying to find discrepancies between the comprehensive plan and the ULDC with language. And we spent quite a considerable amount of time, probably 18 months, going through that. And so we were just trying to understand in our committee if the ULDC will be addressing zoning matters and in the activity centers, or would that still be a comprehensive situation? So it was more of a clarification question than a comment. So thank you so much for allowing us to come and talk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suggs. Ms. Gelhaus, do you have anything to add to Mr. Suggs's comment?
I can try to clarify as best I can. So the comprehensive plan sets out the land use categories, which are the activity centers. The activity center is not a zoning district. Each activity center per the comprehensive plan has a specific intent as far as what type of development the city wants to see there. That intent is then implemented by Chapter 55, the activity center regulations, which sets out specific uses. I believe some of the changes that we've seen from the chamber that they would like to see with the activity center regulations would require changes to the comprehensive plan in order to have them still be consistent, because we can't adopt changes to our code that are inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Do you have any comments to Mr. English's comment about the earth moving, about the designee? Because I agree, if it says Public Works Department, who has that authority? We need to really hone in on maybe the director or city manager or
Yeah.
designee. I think we really need to look at that. So
Absolutely.
can we get a consensus to have staff look at that for the next draft about the actual department as opposed to the director or city manager throughout this document?
So what is the direction? To have it as determined by the city manager, or to have it as determined by the department head? You see, like.
Right.
Or do we not want it to be as determined, just make it a mandatory
Process.
process?
I think it's going
That's
to
what it's
depend on each individual spot that says department's discretion. Public
This is-
Works discretion, utilities discretion. I think it needs to either, I don't know where they all are in the ULDC and how many times it's referenced that way.
I thought you were only talking to what Mr. English was talking about being environmental. Okay.
I'm sure it's throughout.
And to not skate around anything, the discretionary clause is a scapegoat. It's a way out to not
Exactly.
abide by what was stated previously. So if you don't want to do what's stated previously, that clause lets you get out of it. So to what Commissioner Carazone was talking about, we need to, I don't want to make everything so rigid. Maybe if there was some kind of an appeal process or exception, process to that, and it go through the hierarchy again. But to say that there's just this out to not obey what the code says, no, I can't agree with that.
Thank you, and that's exactly what I was getting to. Either, I love the idea, create an appeals process, someone who's held accountable, and
Yeah, I agree that if there's any references to just a specific department, then those should be removed, and then we'll, the director or depending on the situation. I'm not sure what the intent of that clause being in there was. Looking at it, my guess is that they were trying to figure out a way, like if a situation arose where the environmental study didn't quite meet what it was. I don't know, I'm grasping
I
at
think
straws
we
here,
put it
but I
in
don't.
there because people were doing a lot of earth moving, land clearing, without permits. And so it was put in there to make certain that people would get permits
Right.
for the environmental aspect, but that's not.
Right, and we're looking at the environmental studies and how those are done, and at what stage they're done throughout. We're still working with Public Works to determine exactly when they should be required and how recent they should be. So, at a DMP stage, do we really need a really thorough one, or do we need something, as long as it's within I think 5-year range is what was being proposed. Whereas, when they're getting ready to clear, we need that to be very recent because we want to know what's on the site now. So we're looking at some of those changes throughout for all development, not just for the dredge and fill permits.
So what I'm hearing is that it's that any area in the code that is left up to interpretation in order to determine whether something is done or not should actually just be done, be mandatory, and yet have an appeals process and a individual, whether it's city manager or director, being held accountable for such. That's what I'm hearing.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Consensus? Yes.
I agree with that.
And I'd also like to make sure that when it says a specific department, that there is either the department head or city manager / designee. That wasn't captured in Commissioner Carasone's.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I totally missed it then, so sorry. All right, so we have that consensus. So we'll go on to I think you wanted to do by departments, and we'll go ahead and start the departments since we got one question each out of the way. Sticking with the agenda that was presented, I know we're
I have
about
a
10.
couple more questions.
Oh, I have a lot more questions too, so hopefully we'll be able to get through Parks and Rec and possibly police, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, all right? So Parks and Rec, is there somebody, city manager, that needs to get some clarification on the record?
I'm not sure what you're doing.
Yeah, me neither.
What are you talking about, departments?
On the legislative text, its recommended schedule is Parks and Rec, then Police, then Fire, Utilities, Public Works, and Neighborhood Development Services.
To speak?
Yeah,
Or-
We wanted to give the directors an opportunity to come and participate if they had any concerns that they wanted to address with the
Oh,
board.
okay.
So if there's no one here, then they.
Okay.
There's,
Nothing for Public
No,
Works?
ma'am. We're good.
I mean, for Parks and Rec. All right, Police Department, do they have anything in the ULDC that, this draft that they'd like to have addressed?
I'll give them the opportunity to come up and see if they have anything they wanted to say. The police chief is in the back.
And then we'll have Fire come up if they're,
The police always have something
Yep.
to say.
but he's saying no.
He did, and it was no, he's good.
okay. Well, we're just going right through this. How about Fire? If they have anything?
He's gonna walk all the way down here and say no.
Good morning. I have something to say, actually. It's not much. So a lot of our codes that were covered in ULDC are being pulled out. They're being put into administrative code, which is actually, I think it makes it a cleaner version. It's something they talked about doing for a long period of time. So I think that will be better. And they've been working great with us on the parts that are going to remain in there, which I think is fire hydrants and fire lane access. So
Sorry, fire hydrants and,
I believe fire lane access and access roads will
Yeah.
remain in there.
so since you're here, I do have a question. Is everything covered in the ULDC for the 2.2 separate points of access for developments?
I believe actually, Rob, it is, yes. I think it's actually that's part of that may be in fire access and part of that may be in the administrative code. I'm not sure where it went to, but yes, it's still being addressed.
Okay. City manager, if we could get, or somebody could tell me exactly where it is in this 800-page document about the two accesses, I'd love to read more. I could not find it.
We will find it for you.
I'd appreciate it.
It's hard to find in our current code
I-
if you don't know the exact verbiage, so it's.
I just want to make sure it's in there. So, thank you. Is there anything else, chief?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Utilities, moving on through. We're getting up to 11 o'clock here. Moving on through for utilities.
We're doing our part to make sure that we can get through this on time.
I appreciate it. That'll leave us more time for the questions. And
All right, we'll start that then.
Good morning, Rick Newkirk, Utility Director. Our main focus remaining for the next couple of months will be to ensure that the consistency with the existing approved city code language is adhered to. We will make sure the landscaping and irrigation plans are correct, and we will emphasize on the protection of natural resources.
fantastic.
You've got a good writer.
Thank you.
All right. All righty. Thank you very much, Mr. Newkirk. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question?
I have your reference if you want to
Oh,
write down the page
yeah,
number.
please.
It's on page 787, section, or page in the book 15-37.
Thank you very much. Do you have a section number or anything?
No, right now it's section XX-XX, so. that's
All right, thank
not
you.
helpful.
All righty. Public Works.
For the record, Juliana Blea, Public Works Director. Yes, we have several technical items, but we are going to meet separately with the Planning Division and the consultant. We requested a separate meeting for that, but we have nothing for today.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much. Good luck with your meetings. And I am sure Neighborhood Development Services has a list a mile long, since you guys have been so involved with this.
I think we've covered a lot of our policy items for today. Two of the things that I really wanted to bring up in this, one was the agricultural zoning district changing the name. We have a lot of confusion. People get very mixed up with the agricultural zoning versus an agricultural use and what exemptions apply to those. A lot of times we get people who come in and think that because they have agricultural zoning, they're exempt from tree clearing permits or building permits for putting up a barn, and that's not how the agricultural laws work. So I think it would be in our best interest to change the name of the zoning district to really reflect more of what it is. And we've talked about a few.
Do you have any suggestions so we can give you direction?
I'm trying to remember what the ones we came up with were. So they all had estates in the name because
She's
that's what it is.
what's wrong with Northport Estates?
Northport
As it
Estates.
is.
I mean, that's what we call it. It's always
That's
been
what it
the
always
estate.
was.
So something,
Yeah.
But don't we have other ag zoning districts, like out in the West Villages, out east in?
The only areas are the Northport Estates out that are in the north part. The Little Salt Springs is zoned agricultural. That's something I might recommend changing just because it doesn't quite make sense.
Conservation, maybe?
Yeah, something more along that line. And then Lake Geraldine, which I think Lake Geraldine fits in with what the intent of the Northport Estates is also. So I think something along the lines of residential estates or something to that effect. I like having the word estates in there because that's what we know it as.
I like that,
I like
residential
residential
estates.
estates.
Yeah.
Can we get a consensus to change the agricultural zoning district to residential estates zoning?
I like that.
I do, for the purpose of that, if at some point in time there is true agricultural comes in, I don't mind leaving it there for future use, but for the intent of what this is, most definitely, it's perfect.
Well, and I don't think we're proposing changing the uses that are permitted out there. You would still be allowed to do the
Well.
agricultural uses, but
Right.
again, it just removes some of that confusion with the.
People believe they're exempt from all the
Yes.
taxes
Yes.
because
Right.
it's agricultural. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I like that. Yes, residential estates.
Yeah.
And then that would apply to Lake Geraldine and the Northport Estates area. And then we will handle Little Salt Springs separately in what,
Right.
like Commissioner McDowell said, a
Conservation.
conservation zoning or something.
Okay. Does anybody from PZAB, before I state the consensus for the record, do you have anything to add about changing that zoning district? I hear none. Okay, Commissioner Emmerich, were you a yes? I didn't.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Carrison?
Said yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. All righty, do we want to give direction to change Little Salt Springs zoning to conservation, or is that going to be something we'll have a bigger discussion on?
I think we might need a bigger discussion on that. That kind of goes outside. This is probably one of the things that'll come as a recommendation from this. When going through all of this, I think we might need to reevaluate both conservation and the recreation open space because they're very similar, and we might be able to consolidate those into one zoning district and tweak the uses on them a little bit.
Will you be able to do that for the next time that we meet? Okay, so we have a consensus for staff to bring that back for the next meeting for discussion further?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, with that, it is now 10:20. Let's take a 10-minute health break. We'll be back here at 10:30 sharp, and we'll reconvene. 10:39 and we're back in session. We will then, since we've gone through all of staff in the departments, we'll go and start with questions and continue our questions. And we'll start at this end at Commissioner Emmerich. Do you have any questions that you need to have answered?
Waiting for the waiting for the second phase of this on the write-ups.
Fantastic. Commissioner Luke, do you have any follow-up questions?
I do.
Go ahead, please.
First of all, I want to compliment the consultant in the way that you did draft this. Mr. Nicholson spoke about the red line, but everything that you are doing with this structure is right on. Very good job. The finished product is going to be far easier to navigate. One, you addressed tasting rooms. Could you tell me the difference between tasting rooms and a brewery? And if there is mention of being able to locate brewery within the city in this, please?
Yeah, I think a tasting room is really just where you have the ability to sample your product that's already being produced on site. So a brewery would
fall into that. That's what I was
where
wanting
you're
to make
where
sure.
you're producing it on site, but allowing people to come in and sample product on site is what the tasting room would take that next step.
Thank you. Okay, that was the end of that one.
All right, Mr. Nicholson, anybody on your board have any other questions? I know at the first round you did not, but maybe something prompted a question.
I'll poll the board first. Nicholas, do you have any questions for the consultant?
I'm good.
Jerry?
No.
Jim?
No.
John?
No.
Philip?
Thank you, no.
And Chair has no
Okay,
questions.
so
Thank you
I'm-
very much.
I'm going to continue with the board's questions. If something pops up, please make sure you get my attention, and that way then I can call on you. Yeah, jumping jacks works. All right, I do have another question. In the draft, I saw that the fee ordinance was adopted both ways, by ordinance and by resolution. I saw it in the draft, and I'm curious which way is it going to be done, because currently it's done by ordinance.
We'll have to consult with our attorney on this. If it's not done by ordinance, I think that's the correct way of doing it. I think resolution is probably misstated there. So if it's currently done by ordinance, I'm assuming that's the way we would continue.
Okay.
But whatever way is the legal way, we want to continue doing it that way.
Vice Mayor, may I speak to that? Was your question about the adoption of the fee schedule?
Correct.
Yes, and we discussed this on a call that I had with the consultant and legal counsel, and their recommendation is the same recommendation that our office has been making, that items such as the fee schedule are more appropriately adopted by resolution and set by resolution than adopted by ordinance to be codified. So the recommendation is that the fee schedule be taken out of the city code and that it be adopted by resolution and that it be amended accordingly going forward. And that was the same recommendation that the legal counsel from your consulting team made as well.
I agree with that, and the consultant stated that in his opening comments also, discussing it being done by resolution. So I am in agreement with that.
And I can appreciate your attorneyness on this and your thoughts. I have a problem with it being done by resolution. A resolution requires only one reading. This is the fee schedule that the builders and the citizens and everybody has to adhere to. And sometimes things are discovered from first reading to second reading. And by adopting it by resolution is only the one reading. It's one and done. We aren't giving the additional time to hear questions or concerns that are raised during the resolution discussion. So I would like to see it kept as a ordinance because of the two readings. Now, if city attorney can help me figure a way to do this resolution by two readings for just this thing, then I would be golden.
Well, I'd be happy to suggest a couple of options. One, I don't think you can mandate that it be done by 2 readings because the number of readings are required by state statute and by our charter as well. However, if the concern is more public input or more public notice, there are different ways that the city can accomplish that without using an instrument that maybe really legally isn't the ideal instrument. You can hold a workshop if you want. You can publicize it on social media or have a town hall, some type of event where you discuss it prior to adoption. You can continue it at the adoption reading and consider it, at another meeting after that. I think that there are ways to, and probably 10,000 ideas that I'm not thinking of because I'm not so creative about these things, but I think that there are ways that you can incorporate the public and create more transparency and more public input if that's what you're seeking than the process that's mandated, the minimum requirements, and still do it by resolution rather than doing it by ordinance and codifying it into the code. And the same goes with respect to, there are concerns about the public understanding or knowing what the fees are, rather than trying to find it in a code, which I think a lot of people, the public, don't really understand how to define and read codes. You can publicize a fee schedule in different ways as well, on the website and City Hall, other creative mechanisms that are outside my type A brain, but still do it by resolution for the actual adoption.
And I'm not so concerned about how it is adopted. I am concerned with giving the public and the citizens and the builders and everybody the 2 opportunities to weigh in on any fee changes. Because the fee changes are, like for the pool, the water rates, the cost of doing an appeal. There's a lot of costs that are covered on there that the citizens have, and by not having the 2 readings, we get a lot of public participation, but by removing one, you are definitely reducing the amount of participation. Mr. Trolley.
The city attorney makes a valid point to the fact that, you could, these are your minimum requirements, but you could do more. But the problem with that is, that the next commission coming on, and we're gonna have at least, 2 more commissioners up there, that'll be new. They may not know that because they didn't sit here today. And they didn't go back and read all that. So they're not going to know that. We need to have a procedure in place that the procedure is the procedure. My opinion.
Thank you. Anybody to that?
Yes.
Commissioner Luke.
We are totally defining over this last year with the help of our city attorney the difference between an ordinance and a resolution. And the resolution sets the process, the best practice, the way, the procedure that you're going to do it without it being codified. And that's the only reason that the state statute, that's the difference between an ordinance and a resolution. One's codified and the other is not. I don't believe because we changed those fees multiple times over and over that you need to go in and undo an ordinance to set a new ordinance because you're changing 2 fees in the fee schedule. To me, it should be done by resolution. You can, as the city attorney stated, have multiple ways. I mean, you can continue it if something pops up and you need more discussion on it. There's nobody states that it has to be in that single one. The defining factor of it, though, isn't necessarily how many meetings you have or how much discussion you have. It's whether it's codified or not. And I don't believe those types of things, such as fee schedule, need to be codified. I'm in total agreement with the city attorney and legal.
Anybody else to that?
I got locked out, so that's why I came in late. What is it that you're looking for?
So currently, the fee schedule is adopted by ordinance, which requires 2 readings. In the draft ULDC, there is a discrepancy. One place it shows resolution, one place it shows ordinance. So I was looking for clarity on to what process was being done. City attorney weighed in and said to do it by resolution, to not have it codified. I expressed concern about citizen participation because it's only 1 reading for a resolution, and now we're back to the discussion.
I got you now. Okay, so really the question is, do we do the fee schedule by resolution or ordinance?
Correct.
Period.
And I think the confusion is impact fees are required to be adopted by ordinance. It's the other fees that,
Excuse me, folks. Guys? Sorry.
it's the other fees that are adopted by resolution. So, yeah, that's my understanding, is the impact fees are an ordinance.
Okay.
And if I can add to that, I believe in doing a quick search through the document for some of those terms, most of the time it says the fee adopted by the city commission. There are a couple where it says a fee shall be adopted by resolution. I think if we just change them all to the fee adopted by city commission, we can remove that discrepancy. And then however commission determines to adopt it, it's covered by the language in the code.
Ding, ding, ding.
I like that.
I do too.
I like that.
Well, then we have to have the discussion, how is this commission going to adopt the fee schedule? Because if you're going to adopt a fee schedule based on resolution, but you're going to adopt impact fees by ordinance, basically what's the difference?
Because one's required to be adopted by
Is
ordinance.
impact fee required by state statute? Thank you.
But there is no requirement related to the administrative fees which appear in Appendix A to the code.
So can we get a consensus to have the fee schedule adopted by commission be the preferred language?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And for prosperity's sake, let's get it on the record for resolution or by ordinance.
Varies.
Pardon?
Varies.
For the fee schedule?
Are you talking just fee schedule, or are you talking about language throughout the entire, because as I understood it by Ms. Galehouse, it's changing the words throughout the entire.
That's what.
To be by commission approval, and that the fee schedule or whatever the fee in particular it's referring to, because it's not just fee schedule or impact fees, that it would all be a variable. Some would be by ordinance and some would be by resolution.
So my consensus that I'm looking for is to adopt the fee schedule, not impact fees, because that's by state statute, by ordinance. The fee schedule by ordinance.
I think maybe we can discuss how we're going to do it at a later point in time and focus on what we need to in this. That's something.
That's what I thought.
That we could, I mean, the language that they have will allow it to go either way.
All right.
And I think this is a broader topic that we need to have with
Fair enough.
with
Okay.
staff.
So that was my question. So now moving on to the next round, we'll start at this end. Commissioner Luke.
Line 27 of your list, or I should say number 27 of your list of items, that is on page 5 of 5. So what you did by revising the sign regulations, we are compliant to state statute, the change that was done in 2015.
It's federal law, case law, and it will be when we're finished. So we're still working on that, but that's the intent.
Okay, because we have been out of compliance for several years, so it's good to get that in place. Thank you.
It's fairly, a lot of communities are in the same boat. So.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Carrison, do you have any other questions?
Nope.
Commissioner Emmerich?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So currently, the DMP requires a tree survey for all developments. And if I read it correctly, there is a code change to say developments greater than 10 acres. And I'm wondering, why did it change from all developments to developments greater than 10 acres? Because there's a lot of developments that happen that are an acre, 2 acres, that do require a wildlife survey and a tree survey and a gopher tortoise survey and all that kind of stuff. Why are we removing that requirement and making it be 10 acres or more?
So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to find some of the language in here where I have notes. We're looking to redefine our major site and development and our minor site and development. Our minor site and development right now is essentially a building permit. And we'd like to adjust that and call it a building permit and use the minor site and development for what it truly sounds like, a minor site and development. So we're trying to create standards for that, where, you know, if someone's coming in and doing a minor amendment to their property, adding on an addition, something that's not huge, they don't have to go through and pay the full MAS level fees. If they're doing a dog park that has a gazebo, you know, are we gonna charge them the full amount? And in working through some of that, I think the consultants and staff are still kind of tweaking some of that language, and I think that's where that came in, because their initial recommendation was to do a change in standards at 10 acres. And staff is coming back and saying, that's not quite what we had in mind, and we're still working on fixing that language. So that's still a work in progress.
Okay, well, from my perspective, because this is a draft and there was no note saying that y'all are working on that, to me, this is like
No,
a done deal unless
Nope,
we bring
not
it
at
up.
all.
Okay.
Not at all.
So, when I'm looking at this page 3-17, number 8, it says for development sites larger than 10 acres. Are you, and it goes into environmental wildlife survey. Are you also going to be requiring the tree survey, the wildlife survey, the wetlands, whatever is already required for DMP, is that going to be carried forward for development?
Yeah, I believe we would require that on every site. There's no intent to take those requirements off.
So
we're actually, I think, looking at adding them to be a standard, as we discussed in a previous workshop, for even the single family lots.
Yep. Good.
So
So do you need direction from us to change it for the single, or do you need direction from us to discuss this again?
we can definitely bring back the differences. We can focus on the differences between the major and minor and the building permit. We can bring back a further discussion on that.
All right. Do you need a consensus to do that? Or are you good?
We can, either way.
We were already instructed about the
Okay.
10 acres and that to eliminate that requirement. So yeah, that was something that we put forward that staff has corrected.
Okay.
May I ask a question in regards to
Go
that?
ahead, Commissioner.
Isn't there a way to define whether it's new construction or existing? I mean, if you're adding on to something that's existing, it would seem that, you know, the situation that you were talking about adding on.
Yeah, it really is situational. We do have amendments to previously approved plans, and we can use that in some cases. I think the more clear example is with like the dog park, you know. Do you really want a dog park that's just putting up a gazebo and maybe a few other fixtures to have to come through a full-blown major site and development plan? It doesn't really make sense. You know, as we talked about like the urban market gardens, that's another example. If they're not doing full-blown structures, you know, we can have them go through the infrastructure plan, but a minor site and development plan could be more useful. And we've had quite a few instances where we've been like, man, I wish I had something that was just a little bit smaller that we could put this in because it seems excessive to go through a major site development plan.
I look forward to the further discussion. Thank you.
All right, so starting at the other end, Commissioner Emmerich, do you have any follow-up questions?
Ma'am.
Commissioner Carrasone? Commissioner Luke?
No, ma'am.
All right. I am wondering in section 4-3E4, what does major concerns mean? There's that wording and that sounds very vague. I'm just curious, what does that mean?
Do you know what page of the document that's on?
I do not. My notes just show 4.3E4. I can try and find the actual page if I printed it out. Some of them I printed, some of them I didn't.
4.43, 4-3.
I don't think I printed that one. Of course. Because it changed from the may to the shall, and that always concerns me. Chapter 4.3.
Thank you.
I think city manager found the page number, if that's helpful.
Page 301. There's section 4-3, order of application process, is that what?
4.3 is the section that I found it in.
What's the specific language or the?
It says major concerns.
I think it's E4.
Oh, got it, okay. This is existing code language, and it's something that we've had that question as well. It's very subjective. I would definitely be open to making this more concrete as far as, you know, if we receive a certain number of written complaints or a certain number of something that we could change that. It also is confusing because currently everything where we have neighborhood meetings for development master plans, and those all come to commission and anyways. So I'm not sure what situations this would arise, if it's even necessary to be in there.
So maybe, from what I'm hearing, is that this is also a concern of yours to make it a little bit more concrete and not subjective. Is the consensus to have staff go through the document and address anything that says like major concerns?
What I heard was that you needed to evaluate it to
Right.
determine if it even needs to be in there.
Yeah.
And that at a later date, you'll decide whether it needs to be readdressed in a different manner or whether it just needs to be completely voided from the document.
Right, if it's only applying to a development master plan that comes to commission anyways,
Right.
it's redundant information.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's about having staff reevaluate the wording, I'm good with that, yeah.
And I don't know if it also is throughout the document, that kind of
We'll look
language.
for,
Okay.
yeah, we'll look for those.
Do we, Commissioner Emmerich?
I mean, that sounded like they were already working on it.
Yeah.
Great. Commissioner Luke? Okay. I just have two more quick questions. Aggrieved parties. In the current process, if there's an aggrieved party for a development, they have a process that they have to go through to sign up to be an aggrieved party. I did not see a process in this draft. Where might it be? Maybe it's an admin code. I don't know. I just want to make sure we're covered.
I believe it is in the city code.
Okay.
It's not in the ULDC, if I'm not mistaken, and I can double check that. And we're actually working on even refining that in a little more detail as well at this point. But let me just double check. I believe it's in the city code. Yes, it is. It's in Chapter 2, Article 3, for notice procedures for aggrieved or adversely affected persons.
So there's no changes being done to the ULDC to address that? Okay. I just wanted to make sure it was covered in some way, shape, or form instead of dropped off. My other question is page 3-129. It's about appeals. And it just kind of struck me that an appeal to the City Commission Zoning Board of Appeals, is this ZBA being removed from the commission's authority for appointment? Or is it just taking out the word City Commission ZBA? Is it remaining a commission board, I guess is the question.
Don't believe there's any intent to not have it be a commission board, but let me just double check the language that you're referring to.
That's a statute.
I was just
board
gonna say,
also,
maybe
so
that's what
legal
the
has
intent
to-
is to have it more, read more the fact that the commission cannot disband it.
Exactly.
Because it is statutorily required.
So maybe city attorney can weigh in or look into it and come back?
I'm still trying to find the page that you're on,
Yeah, me too.
3-29,
3-129, if you
coming up for me.
And this is the only page that I saw where city commission is crossed off.
Because everything that board does, it's final. It doesn't come back to the commission. They're not an advisory board. They are,
But we appoint
yeah,
to ZBA. That's,
we're not over
Still,
them.
well, yeah, yes, we are. I mean, they still serve at our behest. However, the board being here, its existence is defined by state statute that it must be in existence. But the individuals that are planted on there are serving the commission at their will.
This, the proposed change here, so it's a section 3-43, and it's on the draft page 3-129. That's very confusing. It is not about changing anything with respect to the structure of the zoning board of appeals. It makes a change where a person aggrieved, previously said a person aggrieved by the city manager's interpretation may appeal to the commission. Now it says a person aggrieved by the directors, which I guess that will change, right? It will say the city manager designee may appeal to the zoning board of appeals. So it changes where the appeal goes. It doesn't change anything about the nature of the board or the board appointment.
Okay.
Or the construction of the board.
so by removing the two words city commission is just like a housekeeping thing? Would that be safe to say?
It's changing where the appeal goes. Instead of going to the city
Right.
commission, it'll go to the ZBA.
Right.
This is one of the inconsistencies that's in our code. Certain chapters go to certain places and it's not, there doesn't appear to be a logical reason why they go to different places. And it was to streamline that all appeals would go to the zoning board of appeals.
Okay. I just want to make sure the commission is not being removed from appointment to the board and
No.
and having, okay, thank you for that. And my final question is, what are the next steps? What happens now?
So the next steps, we're still working on, going through this. Obviously, it's an 800-page document. There was no expectation that anyone would have been able to read the entire thing at this point.
Well, thank you very much.
So in order to kind of supplement the consultant's role, our intention is to come back to both of these boards in about a month or so, when you've had more time to digest this, go through the items that are highlighted in yellow. And staff will come back and try to get consensus from both boards on items that need to be addressed, changes that you want to see in the documents. And we'll then forward those consensus items onto the consultant, and then we'll continue to refine also with our city staff. As a few departments mentioned, we're still working with them on some technical details that are getting resolved through the rewrite. And then we'll bring back, I believe, another draft. Is that correct, Libby?
Yeah, we'll have another draft.
Okay, so we'll have a second draft, joint meeting, second draft?
I hope so.
I believe so.
That's probably the best way to
Okay,
do it.
yeah.
I just want, so that they have a level of expectation along with us and the citizens, is it a joint meeting second draft?
Yes.
Okay. And Commissioner Carrasone, you had something you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted a couple of things. First of all, is that I want to make us very clear that the holidays are coming up, so I'm hoping that this does not come back before us until January.
Okay.
Seriously, because there's just, it's not going to happen. We have such limited meeting time during December, even the end of November. I think that, just to be realistic, we're looking at January, the end of January. So there's that. The other thing is, will there be another public participation in the ULDC, or have we even gone out and done a workshop or a community forum where they've been able to kind of put their input? Because I think there is a lot of.
We've done quite a few community workshops. I feel like my gut's saying there's another one after the second draft. Is that correct?
I would hope.
I didn't bring my timeline. I didn't even think of bringing the timeline.
I didn't either. I believe there is another one, and even if it's not in the scope, staff could certainly, do that in addition to it to make sure that we get that public feedback, because it's definitely important. In terms of timing, based on what you're saying, I would guess my thought process would be to try to get back to the planning board, get their input on these additional items, probably early January, and be able to provide that to you when we come back to you as well, to get input to send to the consultant. So
Or you get everything together in January, and then you go to the public and say the beginning of February before it's finally approved,
Yeah.
because it would be great if we could work everything out amongst us and then have a small amount that goes to the public that maybe we missed or
Mhm.
that they believe is, instead of having everything that
Yeah.
we already have,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right, so we can come back to planning board early January, to this board, to the commission, end of
Joint
January,
meeting.
and then do another, community workshop. Then we'll get all of that input, put back into the second draft and do another, joint work meeting.
So what I'm hearing is the joint meeting with PZAB and us is not going to be in January? You're going to meet with PZAB and then us, or?
Yes, to work on this draft and refining this draft, to get more consensus to give to the consultant to refine what we have to create a second draft.
So when are we going to have a joint meeting then with PZAB and commission?
Once the second draft has been completed.
So that would be like March or April?
I'd have to look back at what the timelines are
February.
and discuss that a little bit further.
Probably more
with
like
the consultant.
February, because she's talking early January, meet with the planning and zoning board, and then,
And that may depend on how many changes come out of this as well, as
Right.
far as how long it's gonna take the consultants to put all those changes into a new draft. You know, if they're minor, it's not gonna take long, but if it's extensive, it could take much more time.
you got a Mr. Trolley down there.
Go ahead, thank you.
I'm very happy to serve on this board. I do want to participate in this. It's an important document. I just want to make sure that we're not going to try and bring this to the PZAB in December, because my alter ego will be flying up north.
Thank you.
And I won't be
Yeah,
available at all.
that's another
in
one.
December. So I wanted to just make sure that was
January.
known. So January, it works great.
I think you and Mr. Nicholson can go toe-to-toe as Santa there. I think we need to have a Santa off at our next joint meeting.
Ho, ho, off.
I love it.
All right. So at this point, since we seem to have answered everybody's questions, I'll go through our board and your board with comments, and then we'll adjourn. So Commissioner Luke.
Comment on this?
Yes, on the draft.
Just thank you. I think it went very well. I was focusing on the issues that you brought forward, and I appreciate you doing so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Carrison.
Yeah, I think you guys did a wonderful job, went through it very thoroughly. Fantastic job. And that's it.
Commissioner Emmerich.
Yeah, I agree. Fantastic job. I look forward to getting it down to where we can actually comprehend this document. So I'm looking forward to that.
Mr. Lamont. Do you have any comments?
Just that I'll read the next draft that comes out.
Mr. Nicholson.
Same here. Thank you very much for having us. Greatly appreciated, and look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Mr. Metzger.
Same as Tom said. you know.
Mr. Sawyer.
Nothing to say.
Fantastic. Mr. Nacastro.
Thank you, great job.
And Mr.
I think
Trolley.
they've done a great job. I'm looking forward to the 200-page document.
No way.
I'm happy with 700 pages, but, we're 800 now, so any carving is great. But I appreciate the work you're doing, and thank you very much for working for our fine city.
And I too am very grateful for the consultant and staff's time and energy, everybody that's participated in this. I do have one request. I know we have to publicly notice these meetings for the second draft when we have this joint meeting. Could we please have more than 4 days to read the document? Could you please get it to us like maybe 10 days beforehand so we could really read the document, absorb it, and go through it? 4 days is just, it's not fair for us to be able to vote on things and to have a complete understanding. To just pick and choose without seeing it as a whole, we are not doing our jobs. So if we could get a consensus or something or agreement from the city manager that yes, you're going to give us more than 4 days.
Yes, we will, that, just so everybody's clear, what that means is we'll have to get it out to you probably in a different manner than as the agenda itself.
That's fine.
Which is what we do with the budget process. We get that to you
Exactly.
guys usually at least a week in advance. So we'll just have to, we'll get it out to you in a different manner than as the agenda. So,
Thank you.
just
I would
so- So
appreciate
you're
that.
looking for it that way.
Thank you. And Commissioner Carrison?
Yeah, and Commissioner McDowell, you bring up a great point, and that's why I asked the city clerk to actually make a copy. I know it's a lot of pages, but what my plan is to look through it with a fine-tooth comb from this point until when we meet again. And then this way I can go back and see what has changed and if there's anything that has not been hit upon between what you will work out with staff and what you'll work out with the board. Then I'll have my little sticky notes. Thank you, Commissioner Yates. And
I think you'll need to buy more.
I know, right? And then be able to really have something solid, and we'll have that time to actually, you know, maybe even ask questions to staff during those next 2 months to say, you know, is this going to change? What does this mean? And then hopefully we'll have a better, deeper conversation then.
Good point.
That's my theory.
So looks like we all have homework over the holidays. And,
Unfortunately, yeah.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
at this point then, I don't know.
There you go.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Anything else? Ms. Galehouse, do you have anything else? Mr. Consultant?
No.
All righty. At this point, it is 11:15. I am absolutely shocked. We are adjourned.